My name is Gillian Anderson, 37 years old, and until recently, I was the lead software engineer behind TechFusion's billion-dollar flagship product. 5 years of my life poured into code that would revolutionize the industry. Then came our launch party when my VP Leonard grabbed the microphone and announced they were trimming the fat by firing me to save $200,000 annually. What he did not know was that I owned the intellectual property rights to the core algorithms, his face when he realized priceless. Before I dive into this story of corporate betrayal and sweet justice, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever been underestimated at work. I graduated top of my class at MIT with a double major in computer science and mathematics. Coding had always been my sanctuary, the place where logic reigned and problems had solutions if you just looked hard enough. During my final year, I created an algorithm for data compression that caught the attention of several tech giants, but TechFusion Inc. stood out. They were not the biggest name, but their vision was compelling, creating intuitive software that would bridge the gap between complex data analysis and everyday business applications. The interview process was rigorous, 6 rounds of technical assessments and personality fits. When I finally met Leonard Mills, the vice president of product development, I was exhausted but excited. Tall with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes, Leonard had a presence that commanded attention. He reviewed my algorithm on the spot, asking insightful questions that showed he actually understood the technical aspects, unlike many executives I had encountered. "This is brilliant work, Gillian," he said, sliding my papers back across the table. "Most compression algorithms sacrifice either speed or fidelity. Yours somehow enhances both." I explained how I had approached the problem differently, thinking about data patterns as musical harmonies rather than mathematical sequences. Leonard seemed genuinely impressed, and by the end of our meeting, he offered me a position as a senior software engineer with a salary that exceeded my expectations. "We are building something revolutionary here," he told me, "and I think you could be a key part of it." There was one unusual aspect of my employment agreement. I insisted on retaining partial intellectual property rights to any fundamental algorithms I developed. The company would have exclusive license to use them, but I would maintain ownership. It was not a common arrangement, but my algorithm had given me enough leverage to negotiate this condition. The legal team hesitated, but Leonard pushed it through, probably thinking it would never matter. Rachel Winters from legal handled my onboarding. A sharp woman with quick eyes and a quicker mind, she seemed surprised by my IP arrangement. "This is unusual," she said, reviewing the clause. "Leonard must really want you on board." "I just like to protect my work," I replied. Rachel smiled. "Smart woman. Always protect what is yours." I did not know then how prophetic her words would be. My first year at TechFusion was everything I had hoped for. I built a strong team, including Dexter Reed, a brilliant coder with an uncanny ability to find bugs before they manifested, and Amanda Chen from marketing who could translate our technical jargon into compelling business benefits. We worked long hours, but celebrated our victories together, often grabbing late-night pizza or early morning coffee as we tackled challenges. Leonard was supportive during this period, securing resources we needed and shielding us from corporate politics. He often stopped by my desk to check progress sometimes, bringing coffee and staying to discuss ideas. He seemed to value my input, and I admired his business acumen. We made a good team, his vision and my technical expertise complementing each other. The concept for Fusion Core emerged during a weekend hackathon 18 months after I joined. We were exploring ways to make complex data analysis accessible to non-technical users when I had an epiphany. What if we created an adaptive interface that learned from user behavior, essentially customizing itself to each user's level of expertise and specific needs? I spent 48 hours coding nonstop, emerging with a rough prototype that demonstrated the concept. When I showed it to Leonard, his eyes widened. "This could change everything," he said. "How soon can you develop this into a working product?" "With the right team, maybe 18 months, I estimated." Leonard immediately allocated additional resources to my department. We moved to a larger space, hired 3 more developers, and I was promoted to lead software engineer with a substantial raise. The next few months were intense but exhilarating as we built the foundation for Fusion Core. The core of the product relied on 3 proprietary algorithms. I developed one for adaptive learning, one for data interpretation, and one for predictive modeling. Together, they formed the heart of what made Fusion Core special, its ability to become more intuitive the more you used it. I documented everything meticulously and made sure my IP agreement covered these specific innovations. Our early demos impressed everyone. The board doubled our budget and we became the company's top priority. When we secured a partnership with Global Tech to beta test our product, Tech Fusion's stock jumped 15% in a single day. Suddenly, everyone was talking about an IPO within the next 2 years. Leonard was flying high, appearing in industry magazines and speaking at conferences about the future of adaptive software. Though he always mentioned me as the technical genius behind the product, I noticed he emphasized his own vision and leadership more prominently. Still, I was too engrossed in the work to pay much attention to politics. By the end of our second year of development, we had a working version that impressed every beta tester. Venture capital came pouring in with our latest funding round, valuing the company at over $1 billion. We were no longer a promising startup, but a serious contender in the tech industry. We are going to revolutionize how businesses handle data, Leonard announced at our company-wide meeting after securing the funding, and it all starts with Fusion Core. I believed him. I believed in what we were building. I had no idea that success would eventually transform the ally I thought I had into the person who would try to destroy my career. The first hint that something was changing came during our third year of development. Tech Fusion had grown from a compact team of 30 to over 200 employees. New departments formed, new managers were hired, and layers of bureaucracy emerged that had not existed before. Our once collaborative culture began shifting toward something more corporate and hierarchical. Leonard moved his office to the executive floor, 5 stories above our development team. His casual drop-ins became scheduled meetings, and he started bringing his assistant to take notes, rather than engaging directly. More concerning were the changes in how he spoke about Fusion Core. During a presentation to potential investors, I sat in the back of the room while Leonard described our product. When I conceptualized Fusion Core, I envisioned a system that would adapt to each user, he said. I directed our engineering team to build on my specifications, and they have executed my vision admirably. I felt a twinge of discomfort. This was not an accurate representation of how Fusion Core had been conceived, but I told myself it was just marketing speak, simplifying the story for non-technical audiences. Shortly after this presentation, Leonard hired Patrick Donovan as Chief Operating Officer. Tall, immaculately dressed with an MBA from Harvard and a resume featuring several successful exits from tech startups. Patrick seemed more concerned with financial metrics than product excellence. I first met Patrick during a department review. He sat silently through my technical update, then asked only one question. How can we reduce the development timeline by 30%? We cannot without compromising quality, I replied. The adaptive learning requires extensive testing cycles. Patrick frowned. Every month of development costs us millions in potential revenue. Find a way to accelerate. Leonard, who once would have defended our process, simply nodded in agreement with Patrick. The pressure intensified after that meeting. Our deadlines shortened while our scope expanded. When I requested additional developers to handle the increasing workload, my request was denied due to budget constraints. Yet the company announced new executive hires with lucrative compensation packages the following week. Something feels off, I told Dexter as we worked late one night. 2 years ago, we could not move fast enough. Now they want us to cut corners while they expand the executive team. Dexter looked around to make sure no one was listening. Word is they are positioning for an IPO within 12 months. Patrick has been meeting with investment banks. The timeline did not make sense. Fusion Core needed at least another year of development and testing before it would be ready for full-scale deployment. Rushing it would risk critical failures that could damage the company's reputation permanently. Then came the first round of efficiency measures. 3 junior developers from my team were let go, their responsibilities redistributed among the remaining staff. The executive floor, meanwhile, underwent a lavish renovation, complete with imported furniture and a private chef for executive lunches. One evening, working late, I headed to the executive floor to drop off some documentation Leonard had requested. As I approached his office, I heard voices through the partially open door. The IPO valuation depends on Fusion Core being market-ready, Patrick was saying. We need to show strong projections for the first year post-launch. What about the technical issues Jillian keeps raising? Leonard asked. Look, every product has bugs at launch. We will fix them in updates. What matters is getting to market before our competitors. Patrick paused. Besides, we need to trim expenses before going public. Some of these engineering salaries are excessive for the value they provide. Jillian's team, Leonard asked. Starting there makes sense. Especially her. 200,000 plus benefits for one engineer is steep regardless of how good she is. Once the product is built, we can maintain it with cheaper talent. There was a long pause before Leonard responded. I will think about it. She has been instrumental to the development. Business is business, Leonard. You want that IPO bonus, right? Tens of millions in your pocket if we hit our targets. I quietly backed away from the door, my heart pounding. They were planning to cut my team, possibly me, right before launch, all to make their financials look better for the IPO. After everything we had built, we were just numbers on a spreadsheet to them. The next day, I requested a meeting with Rachel from legal. We had maintained a friendly relationship over the years, occasionally having lunch together. I need to review my IP agreement, I told her, in the privacy of her office, just to refresh my understanding of the terms. Rachel raised an eyebrow but pulled my file. Unusual request. Is everything okay? Just doing some personal career planning, I said casually. She handed me the document, watching as I carefully read through the clauses. This confirms I maintain ownership of the core algorithms, with TechFusion having an exclusive license to use them, correct? I asked. Yes, Rachel confirmed. It is an unusual arrangement, but legally binding. The company cannot use your algorithms without honoring the terms of this agreement. I nodded, returning the document. One more question. If someone were planning organizational changes that might affect product development, would legal need to be consulted? Rachel's expression became guarded. Typically, yes, especially for anything affecting intellectual property or key personnel. As I stood to leave, Rachel said quietly, Jillian, document everything. Emails, meetings, contributions, everything. Why would I need to do that? I asked. Just professional advice I give to anyone in tech. Your work is your currency in this industry. Track it carefully. The warning was clear enough. I started keeping detailed records of all my contributions, backed up my work to personal drives, as permitted by my contract, and documented every interaction with leadership. My first direct confrontation with Leonard came a week later when he announced another reduction in our testing timeline. We cannot properly validate the adaptive learning in just 4 weeks, I protested during our project meeting. The algorithm needs time to demonstrate its effectiveness across diverse use cases. The executive team has decided 4 weeks is sufficient. Leonard replied coolly. We have investor commitments depending on this timeline. And when the product fails because we rushed testing, what will you tell those same investors? The room fell silent. Leonard's face hardened. Perhaps you should focus more on solutions than problems, Jillian. This timeline is not negotiable. Despite the growing tension, development of Fusion Core continued to hit major milestones. The interface was stunning, the adaptive capabilities worked remarkably well in controlled environments, and early user feedback was enthusiastic. We were creating something truly revolutionary, even as the corporate environment deteriorated around us. Then came the announcement that would change everything: the grand product launch party for Fusion Core, scheduled for 6 weeks later at the prestigious Hamilton Hotel downtown. Investors, media, industry analysts, and potential clients would all be there to witness TechFusion's emergence as a major player in the tech industry. This will be our moment, Leonard told the company during the announcement. The culmination of years of visionary leadership and technical execution. I noted he no longer made eye contact with me during these speeches. The distance between us had grown from a crack to a chasm, and I could feel something ominous building. Still, I focused on finishing the product, working 16-hour days with my team to resolve the remaining issues before launch. What I did not realize was that the launch party would not just introduce our product to the world, it would also serve as the stage for my very public humiliation. The weeks leading up to the launch party were a blur of frantic coding, testing, and debugging. My team and I practically lived at the office, ordering in meals and occasionally napping on couches when exhaustion overtook us. Dexter developed an eye twitch from staring at screens for too long, and I caught him more than once talking to his coffee mug as if it were a person. We are going to make it, I assured everyone, though privately I had concerns about rushing certain aspects of the testing. Fusion Core will blow everyone away. The venue for the launch party was spectacular, the grand ballroom of the Hamilton Hotel with its crystal chandeliers and marble columns. Tech Fusion spared no expense, hiring a renowned event planner who transformed the space with interactive technology, displays, ambient lighting that pulsed with data visualizations, and catering from a Michelin-starred chef. The estimated cost for the evening was over $500,000, an irony not lost on me, given the supposed budget constraints that had affected my team. On the morning of the launch, I arrived early to run final checks on the demonstration system. Everything needed to be perfect for the live demo Leonard would be conducting. Despite our strained relationship, I was determined that Fusion Core would succeed. This was not just his product or the company's product. It was my creation, my algorithms, my vision, brought to life. As I was setting up, Amanda from marketing found me. "You look like you have not slept in days," she said, handing me a cup of coffee. "That is an accurate assessment," I replied, gratefully accepting the caffeine. "But it will all be worth it tonight." Amanda hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Have you noticed anything strange about the seating arrangements for tonight?" "I have been too busy making sure the product actually works to worry about seating charts. You are not at the main table with the executive team. You are seated with the general staff despite being the lead engineer." I shrugged. Politics. Not surprising given how things have been going. "Just seems odd for the person who created the product," Amanda said, giving me a concerned look before returning to her preparations. By 6 o'clock that evening, the ballroom was filling with guests in formal attire. Investors mingled with tech journalists, industry analysts chatted with potential clients, all while sampling gourmet appetizers and champagne. The excitement was palpable, everyone eager to see the product that had generated so much industry buzz. I wore a simple black dress, professional but understated. As the technical lead, I expected to be called upon if there were any issues with the demonstration, but otherwise this was Leonard's show. He had made that increasingly clear in recent weeks, positioning himself as the visionary behind Fusion Core. Leonard arrived with Patrick and several board members, all in expensive suits, laughing and clapping each other on the back like old friends celebrating a shared victory. Leonard wore a custom-tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than a month of my salary. He worked the room confidently, shaking hands and accepting congratulations as if Fusion Core were already a confirmed success. Not once did he acknowledge me or any member of the development team. "Is it just me, or is he acting like we do not exist?" Dexter muttered, sipping his drink beside me. "Not just you," I confirmed. "Something feels off." At 8 o'clock, the formal presentation began. The lights dimmed, and a slick video played on massive screens, showing stylized representations of Fusion Core's capabilities, set to dramatic music. The audience applauded as Leonard took the stage spotlights, highlighting his confident smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests," he began, his voice amplified by the sound system. "Tonight marks the culmination of a journey that began with a vision I had 3 years ago. A vision of software that would learn, adapt, and transform how businesses interact with their data." I felt my jaw tighten. His vision. I exchanged glances with Dexter, who rolled his eyes. Leonard continued describing Fusion Core's capabilities in broad, impressive terms, carefully avoiding technical specifics while emphasizing the revolutionary nature of the product. He spoke for nearly 20 minutes without once mentioning me or the development team. Then came the demonstration. Leonard smoothly showcased the interface, highlighting how it adapted to different user inputs and presenting the predictive modeling capabilities. To my relief, everything worked perfectly. Whatever else was happening, at least the product itself was performing as designed. The audience was clearly impressed. I could see investors nodding approvingly, journalists taking notes, potential clients leaning forward with interest. This was the moment we had worked toward for years, and despite everything, I felt a surge of pride. As the demo concluded, the audience erupted in applause. Leonard soaked it in, beaming with satisfaction. This should have been the highlight of the evening, the successful unveiling of our product. Instead, it was about to become the scene of my professional execution. Thank you," Leonard said as the applause died down. "Before we move to the reception portion of our evening, I have one more announcement to make." He paused, and something in his expression changed to coldness, entering his eyes that sent a chill through me. As Tech Fusion prepares to enter this exciting new phase, we have had to make some strategic decisions about our organizational structure and resource allocation. In business, timing is everything, and sometimes we must make difficult choices for the greater good of the company. The room had gone completely silent, attention fixed on Leonard. I felt a growing sense of dread. Effective immediately, we are implementing certain efficiency measures to optimize our operations heading into the next quarter. As part of these measures, we will be eliminating several positions that, while valuable during development, are no longer essential to our core business moving forward. My heart began pounding as I realized what was happening. He would not dare. Not here. Not now. Leonard's eyes found me in the crowd. In particular, I want to address one significant change. Gillian Anderson, who has served as our lead engineer, will be leaving Tech Fusion tonight. Gasps rippled through the audience. I felt as if the floor had dropped out from under me, my face burning with shock and humiliation as hundreds of eyes turned in my direction. Leonard continued, his voice carrying throughout the ballroom. As they say, we are trimming the fat. This single change will save the company approximately $200,000 annually in salary and benefits funds that can be better allocated to sales and marketing efforts as we scale Fusion Core. The room spun around me. He had just fired me publicly at the launch party for the product I had created, framing my dismissal as a cost-cutting measure. The calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. Security will escort Miss Anderson from the premises after the conclusion of tonight's event. We thank her for her contributions during the development phase and wish her well in future endeavors. I stood frozen as murmurs spread through the crowd. Some people looked away in embarrassment. Others stared openly with morbid curiosity. I caught sight of Rachel from legal, her face pale with shock. Clearly, this had not gone through proper channels. Leonard smoothly transitioned back to praising the product and inviting everyone to enjoy the rest of the evening. As he left the stage to applause, significantly more subdued than before, I saw Patrick give him a subtle nod of approval. Amanda appeared at my side. That was beyond unprofessional. Are you okay? I could not speak, my throat constricted with emotion, a mixture of rage, humiliation, and disbelief. Dexter joined us, his face flushed with anger. What the actual hell was that he cannot just fire you at the launch party? That has to violate about a dozen HR policies. A security guard approached, looking uncomfortable with his assignment. Miss Anderson, I've been instructed to escort you from the building at the conclusion of the event. I can find my own way out, I said, finally finding my voice. It came out steadier than I expected, given the hurricane of emotions inside me. I walked through the crowd, head held high despite the stares and whispers. Some former colleagues reached out with sympathetic touches or murmured support, but most kept their distance, afraid of associating with the person who had just been so publicly discarded. In the marble bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and pressed my forehead against the cool metal door, finally allowing tears to fall. 5 years of my life, countless hours of work, the algorithms I had created from nothing, all to be dismissed like an unnecessary expense. After composing myself, I washed my face and reapplied my makeup with steady hands. I would not give Leonard the satisfaction of seeing me break down. I took a deep breath, straightened my dress, and returned to the ballroom long enough to collect my purse and say goodbye to the few colleagues brave enough to approach me. As I waited for the valet to bring my car, I saw Leonard and Patrick through the hotel's glass doors laughing together near the bar, champagne flutes in hand, probably toasting their clever cost-cutting measure. Sitting in my car in the parking garage, tears streaming down my face, I remembered Rachel's words from months ago, document everything. And I had. Every email, every meeting note, every line of code, every contribution to the intellectual property that made Fusion Core possible. Most importantly, I had that unusual IP agreement that Leonard had so casually approved years ago, never thinking it would matter. It was about to matter very much indeed. The drive home from the Hamilton Hotel passed in a blur. Streetlights smeared into streaks of color through my tears, and I barely registered the familiar turns to my apartment. By the time I parked, emotional exhaustion had given way to a strange hollow calm. I had been publicly humiliated, my professional reputation potentially damaged, but underneath the shock, something else was forming: resolve. I spent that first night alternating between bouts of crying and periods of intense focus, reviewing my employment contracts and IP agreements. Sleep came in brief, restless intervals until dawn broke, finding me at my kitchen table surrounded by legal documents and notes. My phone had been buzzing incessantly with messages from colleagues and friends who had witnessed or heard about the launch party disaster. I responded to none of them needing time to process and plan. The only exception was a brief text to Dexter, "I am okay. We'll be in touch soon." By morning, news of my firing had already reached industry blogs. TechCrunch ran a piece titled, "Tech Fusion's Dramatic Launch Product Unveiling or Public Execution." Several commenters questioned the professionalism of Leonard's approach, while others speculated about the real reasons behind my dismissal. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Dexter holding a paper bag from my favorite bakery and wearing an expression of concerned determination. "You look terrible," he said by way of greeting. "Thank you for that assessment," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. "I brought sustenance," he said, placing the bag on my counter. "And information." I made coffee while Dexter filled me in on the aftermath at Tech Fusion. The office was buzzing with gossip, with most people shocked by the public nature of my firing rather than the firing itself. Management had already begun reassigning my responsibilities, with Leonard telling the team that my role had been largely ceremonial in the final stages of development. "The worst part," Dexter said, breaking a croissant in half, "is that Fusion Core is not functioning properly without you. The adaptive learning module keeps throwing errors when pushed beyond basic test cases." I was not surprised. The algorithm required specific calibration approaches that I had deliberately not fully documented, yet planning to complete that process after launch. "Have they tried to access my development notes?" I asked. "That is the thing," Dexter said, leaning forward. "Your access was immediately revoked, but when they tried to access your project directories, they discovered your notes are incomplete. The core algorithms are essentially black boxes without your expertise." A small, vindicating thrill ran through me. I had not been deliberately sabotaging anything, but I had been careful about how I documented my most innovative work, always mindful of protecting my intellectual property. "What is their plan?" I asked. "Leonard is telling everyone they will reverse engineer if necessary, but the development team knows that could take months, especially for the adaptive learning components." I sipped my coffee, thinking, has legal been involved? Rachel has been in closed-door meetings with the executive team all morning. She does not look happy. Over the next few days, I maintained my silence, not responding to increasingly urgent emails from Tech Fusion requesting exit interviews and knowledge transfer sessions. Instead, I focused on researching similar cases where engineers had retained IP rights while working for companies. I consulted with Eleanor Bradley, an attorney specializing in intellectual property law, bringing my agreements and documentation for review. "This is one of the most clearly drafted IP retention clauses I have seen," Eleanor said, examining my contract. "Most companies would never agree to these terms." "How did you manage this?" "They wanted my compression algorithm badly enough," I explained. "And at the time, no one thought these provisions would ever be relevant." Eleanor smiled. "Well, they are extremely relevant now. Tech Fusion cannot legally use your algorithms without honoring this agreement, which includes the non-termination clause on page 4. The clause in question stated that any termination of employment would require a 6-month transition period for any proprietary technologies I had developed, during which I would provide consultation at my current salary plus a 50% premium. "So they cannot just fire me and keep using my algorithms?" I asked. "Not without triggering significant penalties and potentially losing the license entirely." Eleanor confirmed. "Based on this documentation, you have an extremely strong position." 1 week after the launch party, I received the news I had been waiting for. Dexter called during his lunch break, speaking in a hushed voice. "They tried to deploy Fusion Core to our first major client this morning. Total disaster. The system crashed within 20 minutes, and when they tried to restart it, the adaptive algorithms failed to initialize properly." "How bad is it?" I asked, trying to keep the satisfaction from my voice. "Bad enough that the client is threatening to pull their 7-figure contract. Patrick is on a rampage, and Leonard looks like he might have a stroke." Later that day, Amanda from marketing texted me, "Major crisis here. Leonard blaming engineering team for sabotage. Client demo failed spectacularly. damage control in full swing. I was beginning to see the full picture. Leonard had fired me thinking the product was complete, never understanding that my ongoing involvement was crucial to its functionality. The algorithms were mine both legally and practically and without me. Fusion Core was just an attractive shell without its essential core. The next morning I converted my spare bedroom into a command center of sorts. I set up my development computers, printed out all relevant documents, and created a timeline of events leading up to my termination. If Tech Fusion wanted to play hardball, I would be prepared. As I was organizing my materials, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. Jillian, it is Rachel from Legal at Tech Fusion. My guard immediately went up. Rachel, I am surprised to hear from you. This is not an official call, she said quietly. I am not using my work phone. I just thought you should know that I had no idea what Leonard was planning at the launch party. That was not approved by legal or HR. I figured as much, I replied. It seemed too unprofessional even for the new Tech Fusion culture. Rachel hesitated. There is something else you should know. Leonard has been planning this for months. He and Patrick structured the timing specifically to maximize his bonus before the IPO while minimizing your compensation. How convenient for them, I said, my voice tight. The company is in trouble, Jillian. The product is not working properly, and the technical team cannot figure out why. Major clients are getting nervous, and the IPO timeline is in jeopardy. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. I suspect they will be contacting you soon, Rachel continued. Just be prepared. Patrick wants to solve this as cheaply as possible. Leonard just wants to save face. After Rachel's call, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was no longer just about my humiliation. It was about holding people accountable for their actions and ensuring my work was respected. 3 days later, the formal letter arrived by courier. On Tech Fusion letterhead, it requested my presence for a consultation meeting regarding intellectual property matters with the legal team. The letter was polite, professional, and betrayed not a hint of the desperation I knew was driving it. I called Eleanor immediately, and we arranged for her to accompany me to the meeting. Then I selected my outfit carefully, not the power suit they might expect, but a simple, elegant dress that projected confidence without aggression. This would not be a battle of emotions, but of facts and leverage. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just my future, but potentially the entire trajectory of Tech Fusion. The morning of the meeting, I woke before my alarm, adrenaline already coursing through my system. I had rehearsed various scenarios with Eleanor, preparing responses for different approaches Tech Fusion might take. Would they be conciliatory, hostile, or attempt to intimidate me with legal threats? Whatever their strategy, I was determined to remain calm and focused on the facts. I chose a navy blue dress with subtle geometric patterns, professional but distinctive. My makeup was minimal but precise, my hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Every detail of my appearance was calculated to project confidence and competence, a stark contrast to how they had last seen me shocked and humiliated at the launch party. Eleanor met me at a coffee shop near Tech Fusion's headquarters. In her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes behind stylish glasses, she exuded the quiet authority of someone who had seen every corporate trick in the book. Remember, she said as we finished our coffee, you have both legal standing and practical leverage. They need you more than you need them. Let them do most of the talking initially, and do not agree to anything without my approval. We arrived at the Tech Fusion building exactly 5 minutes before our scheduled meeting. The security guard at the front desk did a double take when he saw me, clearly uncomfortable. Miss Anderson, he said, checking his list. You are expected in the 4th floor conference room. I need to issue you a visitor badge. A visitor badge. After 5 years of walking through these doors as a senior employee, I was now an outsider. The plastic badge felt strange against my palm, a tangible symbol of how completely things had changed. As we rode the elevator up, I noticed my reflection in the polished metal doors. I looked composed, but there was a hardness in my expression that had not been there before. Tech Fusion had taught me valuable lessons, just not the ones they had intended. The elevator doors opened to reveal the executive floor, all glass, chrome, and understated luxury. A far cry from the utilitarian spaces where the development team worked. As we walked toward the conference room, we passed my old desk on the open workspace floor. It had already been cleared out, every trace of my 5 years erased. A young man I did not recognize now occupied the space, hunched over the keyboard with the intensity of someone tackling a difficult problem. Several former colleagues noticed me walking by. Some nodded in silent support. Others quickly looked away, afraid of being seen acknowledging me. Office politics, at its most primal. The receptionist outside the conference room smiled professionally. "They are expecting you, Miss Anderson. Can I get you anything? Water, coffee?" "Water would be fine, thank you," I replied, matching her professional tone. "And for your companion?" she asked, glancing at Eleanor. Attorney Eleanor corrected smoothly, offering her business card. "Eleanor Bradley, representing Miss Anderson. Water would be lovely." The receptionist's smile faltered slightly as she took the card. Clearly, Tech Fusion had not anticipated I would bring legal representation. Good. We were shown into the conference room, a spacious area with floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of the city. The long table gleamed with polish, surrounded by ergonomic chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Rachel, from legal, was already there, arranging documents. She looked up as we entered, her expression carefully neutral, though I caught a flicker of what might have been approval in her eyes. "Jillian, thank you for coming," she said formally. "And Miss Bradley, I was not aware Miss Anderson would be bringing counsel." "It seemed prudent given the circumstances," Eleanor replied smoothly. Before Rachel could respond, the door opened again and Leonard walked in. He had lost weight since I had last seen him, his expensive suit hanging slightly loose, dark circles under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Good. Let him suffer a fraction of the stress he had caused me. For a moment he seemed taken aback by my presence, as if he had expected a broken, desperate version of me, rather than the composed woman sitting confidently at the table. He recovered quickly, forcing a professional smile. "Jillian, thank you for making time for this meeting," he said, extending his hand. I looked at his hand but did not take it. "I received a formal request from legal. Here I am." He withdrew his hand, the smile becoming strained. "Yes, well, we have some matters to discuss regarding the transition." "I imagine you do," I replied evenly. Leonard took a seat across from me while Rachel positioned herself at the end of the table, legal pad ready. The company attorney, a serious-looking man named William Hargrove, whom I had met only a few times during my tenure, entered next and took a seat beside Rachel. We engaged in stilted small talk while waiting for the final participant. The tension in the room was palpable, everyone carefully avoiding the elephant in the room. Finally, the door opened once more and Patrick strode in, radiating impatience. Unlike Leonard, Patrick showed no signs of stress. His custom suit fit perfectly his expression, one of mild annoyance, as if this meeting were an inconvenient interruption to his important day. He gave me a cursory nod before taking his seat beside Leonard. "Let us get started," Patrick said without preamble. "We have a busy schedule today." William cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. We are here to discuss certain intellectual property matters related to the Fusion Core product and Miss Anderson's former role at Tech Fusion." "Former role that was terminated without proper procedure," Eleanor interjected smoothly. "Just to ensure the record is clear." William's expression tightened slightly. "That matter is not on today's agenda, but we can certainly schedule a separate discussion regarding the termination process if needed." "The manner of termination is directly relevant to the intellectual property issues," Eleanor countered. "As specified in Miss Anderson's employment agreement, Section 7.3. Rachel flipped through her documents, locating the relevant section. She showed it to William, whose frown deepened as he read. "Perhaps we should start by outlining the current situation," William suggested, redirecting the conversation. "As you know, Tech Fusion has begun deployment of Fusion Core to our initial clients. We have encountered certain technical challenges during this process." "Challenges?" Patrick interrupted. "Let us be direct. The system is not functioning as expected. Key components are failing during implementation, specifically the adaptive learning modules." He fixed me with an accusatory stare. "We believe these issues could be resolved quickly with Miss Anderson's assistance. We are prepared to offer a consulting arrangement at a competitive hourly rate to facilitate this knowledge transfer. I maintained eye contact with Patrick but said nothing, letting the silence grow uncomfortable. Leonard shifted in his seat. Jillian, we recognize that your expertise would be valuable during this transition period. The company is prepared to be generous with compensation for your time. Generous, Eleanor asked. Please define what you consider generous in this context. $200 per hour with an estimated 40 hours of consultation required, Patrick said promptly. A total of $8,000 for what should be relatively straightforward documentation and knowledge transfer. I nearly laughed at the insulting offer but kept my expression neutral. Eleanor made a show of consulting her notes. My understanding is that Miss Anderson's algorithms form the core intellectual property that makes this product viable. Is that correct? They are important components, William acknowledged cautiously. And these algorithms are covered under Miss Anderson's special IP agreement, which grants TechFusion a license to use them contingent upon certain conditions. Conditions that appear to have been violated by her termination. The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. Rachel was studiously avoiding eye contact with anyone focusing on her legal pad. What exactly are you suggesting? Patrick asked, his voice hardening. I am not suggesting anything, Eleanor replied. I am stating a fact. Under the terms of Miss Anderson's employment agreement, any termination requires a 6-month transition period for proprietary technologies, during which she would provide consultation at her current salary, plus a 50% premium. Leonard paled slightly. William flipped frantically through the documents before him. Furthermore, Eleanor continued, premature termination without this transition period constitutes a material breach of the license agreement for the algorithms in question. Patrick leaned forward, his patience clearly evaporating. This is absurd. She was an employee developing products for the company. An employee with a very specific intellectual property arrangement, Eleanor corrected. One that your legal department approved and your executive team signed. William found the relevant section and showed it to Patrick, whose expression darkened as he read. This cannot be enforceable, Patrick said, looking to William for confirmation. It appears to be properly executed, William admitted reluctantly. Though we would need to review the circumstances under which it was approved. The circumstances are irrelevant, Eleanor said firmly. The agreement was signed by authorized representatives of TechFusion and has been in effect throughout Miss Anderson's employment. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Rachel finally spoke up, her voice carefully professional. Based on my review of the documentation, Miss Bradley is correct regarding the terms of the agreement. The license to use Miss Anderson's algorithms is contingent upon compliance with the employment terms, including the transition provisions in the event of termination. Leonard looked stricken. Are you saying we cannot legally use Fusion Core without Jillian's consent? That is exactly what she is saying. I spoke for the first time since the substantive discussion began. The algorithms that make Fusion Core work, the ones currently failing during your client deployments, are mine. You have a license to use them, but that license is now in jeopardy due to how you chose to handle my termination. Patrick's face flushed with anger. This is corporate extortion. We will fight this in court. You certainly could try, Eleanor agreed pleasantly. Of course, litigation would take months, possibly years, during which time your ability to deploy Fusion Core would remain in question. I imagine that would complicate your IPO plans considerably. The look that passed between Leonard and Patrick confirmed we had hit a nerve. The IPO was their endgame, their big payday, and anything that threatened that timeline was a serious problem. Before Patrick could respond, the door burst open, and a breathless assistant entered. Mr. Donovan, I apologize for the interruption, but Global Tech is on the line. Their CEO is demanding to speak with you immediately about the system failure they experienced this morning. Patrick's jaw tightened. Tell him I will call back within the hour. Sir, he is saying they are reconsidering the entire contract if we cannot resolve the issues by end of day. Patrick stood abruptly. Take a message. I will handle it shortly. As the assistant left, Patrick turned back to face me, his composure cracking. This is not coincidence. You deliberately sabotaged the system before leaving. I did nothing of the sort, I replied calmly. The algorithms require specific calibration approaches that only I fully understand. Without proper implementation, they will naturally fail under real-world conditions. This is not sabotage. It is simply the complex nature of adaptive learning systems. The company attorney, William, who had been quietly assessing the situation, finally spoke up. Perhaps we should take a short break to review our positions. Excellent suggestion, Eleanor agreed. Miss Anderson and I will wait in the reception area. As we stood to leave, William slid a document across the table toward Leonard, a document I recognized immediately as my IP agreement, the one that was about to change the power dynamic completely. Eleanor and I sat in the reception area, sipping water and speaking in low tones about the meeting. The receptionist kept glancing our way, clearly curious about what was happening behind the closed conference room door. The muffled sounds of raised voices occasionally filtered through, suggesting the discussion had become heated after our departure. They are in a very difficult position, Eleanor observed. Legally and practically. The IPO is almost certainly their primary concern, and anything that threatens that timeline represents millions in lost opportunity for the executives. I nodded. Leonard stands to gain the most. As VP of Product Development, his stock options would be worth tens of millions if the IPO succeeds. And now that success hinges entirely on you, Eleanor said with a small smile. A fact they are likely discussing quite intensely at this moment. After 20 minutes, the receptionist received a call and then informed us that the meeting would reconvene. As we re-entered the conference room, the tension was palpable. Leonard looked ashen, while Patrick's usual polished demeanor had given way to barely contained frustration. Rachel and William sat with carefully neutral expressions, though Rachel could not quite hide the glint of satisfaction in her eyes. We have reviewed the IP agreement, William began once everyone was seated. While there may be room for interpretation regarding certain provisions, the core terms are problematic from the company's perspective. Problematic in what way? Eleanor asked innocently, though we both knew exactly what he meant. William cleared his throat. The agreement clearly grants Miss Anderson ownership of the core algorithms with a license to Tech Fusion contingent upon specific employment conditions. Those conditions include the transition period in the event of termination. Patrick interrupted, his voice tight. What William is dancing around is that we have a technical and legal issue that needs resolution. Quickly. I raised an eyebrow. And how do you propose we resolve it? Leonard, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Jillian, we made a mistake. The manner of your termination was inappropriate. We should have handled it differently. That is quite an understatement, I replied coolly. You publicly humiliated me at a company event after 5 years of dedicated service, framing my dismissal as a cost-cutting measure. Leonard had the decency to look ashamed. It was a regrettable decision made under pressure. Pressure from whom, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Leonard glanced briefly at Patrick before continuing. That is not important now. What matters is finding a path forward that works for everyone. Patrick, clearly impatient with Leonard's apologetic approach, leaned forward. Let us be practical. You want compensation for your intellectual property and the manner of your termination. We need Fusion Core to work properly for our clients and our IPO timeline. There must be a middle ground. I am listening, I said, keeping my expression neutral. William slid a document across the table. We have drafted a proposed settlement agreement. It includes compensation for the full 6-month transition period at the premium rate specified in your original agreement, plus an additional severance package and stock options that would vest upon IPO. I did not touch the document, instead letting Eleanor review it first. She scanned it quickly, her expression revealing nothing. This offer assumes Miss Anderson would provide immediate technical assistance to resolve the current issues with Fusion Core, William added. And what about the public nature of her termination? Eleanor asked. The potential damage to her professional reputation. Before William could respond, the conference room door burst open. A man I recognized as the Chief Technology Officer, Marcus Reed, entered without knocking, his face flushed with urgency. We have a serious problem, he announced, then stopped short upon seeing me. Oh, Jillian. Good. You are here. Patrick stood. Marcus, we are in the middle of a meeting. A meeting that will not matter if we lose Global Tech and Tech Vantage, Marcus replied tersely. Both implementations have completely failed. The adaptive learning modules are generating cascading errors, that are corrupting client data. Their systems had to be taken offline. The blood drained from Leonard's face. How bad is it? Bad enough that Global Tech's legal team is already drafting a breach of contract notice, Marcus said. We promised them a functioning product. What we delivered is currently destroying their productivity. Patrick cursed under his breath. Can your team fix it? Marcus laughed without humor. Fix proprietary algorithms we did not create and do not fully understand. In what time frame? Hours, days. The documentation is incomplete, and the code itself is elegant but complex. We would essentially need to reverse engineer Jillian's work, which could take weeks or months. The room fell silent as the full implications sank in. TechFusion was facing not just the loss of major clients, but potentially devastating legal consequences for delivering a non-functional product. Patrick turned to me, his earlier hostility replaced by barely disguised desperation. Name your price. Excuse me, I said, though I had heard him perfectly well. Your price, he repeated. Whatever it takes to get Fusion Core working immediately and maintain our IPO timeline. Just name it. I exchanged glances with Eleanor, who gave me a subtle nod. This was the moment we had anticipated when their need for my expertise outweighed all other considerations. My terms are non-negotiable, I said calmly. First, full compensation for the 6-month transition period at the premium rate as specified in my agreement. William nodded. That is already included in our offer. Second, a public statement from TechFusion acknowledging my role as the principal architect of Fusion Core's adaptive learning technology and clarifying that my departure was a mutual decision rather than a termination. Leonard winced but nodded. We can draft something appropriate. Third, I continued. I want my own division within TechFusion with complete autonomy over staffing, budget, and project direction. I would report directly to the board, not to any executive. Patrick began to object, but Marcus cut him off. Give it to her. Without functioning algorithms, we have no product, no clients, and no IPO. And finally, I said, meeting Leonard's gaze directly. Leonard steps down as VP of Product Development. His position and responsibilities transfer to me. The room erupted in protest. Patrick slammed his hand on the table. That is completely unreasonable. You cannot dictate our executive structure. I am not dictating anything, I replied evenly. I am stating my terms for resolving this situation. You are free to reject them and pursue other options. What other options? Marcus asked bluntly. We need those algorithms working by tomorrow to save the Global Tech contract. No one else can do that. Leonard had gone very still, his eyes fixed on the table. When he finally looked up, I was surprised to see not anger but resignation in his expression. She is right, he said quietly. This situation is my creation. I made the decision to terminate Jillian the way I did, and I did it for the wrong reasons. He turned to Patrick. We need to accept her terms. All of them. Patrick stared at him incredulously. You cannot be serious. You would give up your position just like that. My position is already compromised, Leonard replied. Once the board learns that my decisions have jeopardized our major clients and our IPO, my days are numbered anyway. He looked back at me. At least this way the company survives. Rachel, who had been taking notes throughout this exchange, spoke up. From a legal perspective, these terms would resolve the IP license issues and potentially mitigate the client contract problems. It is actually a reasonable solution to an otherwise untenable situation. Patrick looked from face to face, realizing he was outnumbered. With a curse, he pushed back from the table. Fine. Draft the paperwork, but the board will have questions about how we got here. I imagine they will, I agreed, particularly about the decision-making process that led to my termination without legal or HR consultation. Patrick glared at me but said nothing more before storming out of the room. In the silence that followed, Leonard looked at me with a mixture of respect and resignation. You planned for this all along. Did not you? The IP agreement? The documentation strategy? You protected yourself from the beginning. I protected my work. I corrected him. The work you tried to take credit for, then discard when it suited your financial interests. He nodded slowly, then slid my IP agreement across the table. Well played, Jillian. Leonard stared at the document for a long moment, then looked back at me with a nervous chuckle that failed to mask his defeat. "This is a joke, right?" He whispered the same words from the thumbnail text that had predicted this very moment. "No, Leonard," I replied quietly. "This is accountability." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. My first day back at Tech Fusion was surreal, walking through the same doors, not as a discarded employee, but as the new VP of Product Development with my own division and direct access to the board. The expressions on people's faces ranged from shock to admiration to cautious curiosity. My first priority was stabilizing Fusion Core for our existing clients. I worked directly with the technical teams, explaining the calibration processes and implementation details that had been missing from the documentation. Within 48 hours, both Global Tech and Tech Vantage had functioning systems, their threatened legal actions put on hold. Leonard cleared out his office with minimal fuss, avoiding eye contact with everyone as he carried his personal belongings to his car. I heard later that he had taken a position with a smaller competitor, though at a significantly reduced level of responsibility and compensation. Sometimes karma works efficiently. Patrick remained at Tech Fusion, though his influence had diminished considerably after the board learned the full story of how his cost-cutting pressure had nearly destroyed the company's flagship product and IPO prospects. He avoided me entirely, taking the long way around if he saw me coming down a hallway. With my new authority, I immediately rehired several talented engineers who had been let go during Patrick's efficiency measures, including bringing Dexter on as my technical lead. His first day, he walked into my new office, looked around at the executive suite furnishings, and simply said, "Nice upgrade." "The view is better," I agreed, gesturing to the floor-to-ceiling windows, "but the responsibilities are heavier." "At least the right person is carrying them now," he replied. Rachel from legal became one of my closest allies in navigating the corporate politics of the executive level. Her subtle warning before the confrontation had given me valuable time to prepare, and now she helped me understand the power dynamics of the board and senior leadership. "You made quite an impression," she told me over lunch one day. "Several board members have commented that they wish they had met you before all this happened." "Better late than never," I said, though I could have done without the public firing part of the journey. Amanda from marketing took charge of crafting the public statement about my mutual decision to step away briefly before returning in an expanded leadership role. She managed to turn the narrative into a positive story about Tech Fusion, recognizing and promoting internal talent, completely rewriting the public perception of what had happened at the launch party. The most satisfying moment came 3 months after my return when I presented Fusion Core's performance metrics to the board. Client satisfaction was at 97%. Implementation issues had decreased by 84%, and our sales pipeline had doubled since the product had stabilized. The adaptive learning capabilities are exceeding even our most optimistic projections, I explained, showing charts of system performance across different client environments. The algorithms improve with each new implementation, making the product more valuable over time. The board chairman nodded approvingly. "A remarkable turnaround, Jillian. You have taken a potential disaster and transformed it into our strongest asset." "That was always the potential of Fusion Core," I replied. "It just needed the right leadership and technical understanding to realize it." My healing process was neither quick nor linear. There were days when the memory of that public humiliation would return, suddenly sending a flush of shame and anger through me. I would find myself reliving the moment hearing Leonard's voice announce my termination to a room full of industry peers. On those days, I allowed myself to feel the emotions, fully understanding that suppressing them would only prolong the healing process. Sometimes I would call Eleanor, who had become both a legal advisor and a friend, and talk through my feelings. "Trauma does not vanish overnight," she reminded me during one such conversation. "Even when justice is served." "Is this justice, though?" I asked. "Or just a different kind of power dynamic?" "You earned your position through intelligence, preparation, and hard work," she said firmly. "Unlike Leonard, who tried to build his success on taking credit for others' contributions. That is the difference." Gradually, the sharp edges of the experience began to soften. I found joy in building something meaningful with a team that respected my leadership and vision. We expanded Fusion Core's capabilities, developed new products based on the same adaptive learning principles, and created a company culture that valued innovation and collaboration over politics and credit stealing. 6 months after my return, Tech Fusion successfully completed its IPO. The stock price exceeded projections, making my negotiated options worth several $1 million. Financial security was a welcome side effect of the ordeal, though not the most valuable outcome. What I valued more was the transformation in my own understanding of corporate dynamics and self-worth. I had learned that technical brilliance alone was insufficient protection in environments where politics and financial incentives could overpower merit. Documentation, legal agreements, and strategic alliances were just as important as coding skills in navigating corporate waters. More importantly, I had learned that standing up for yourself in your work does not require becoming bitter or vengeful. When I had the opportunity to completely destroy Leonard's career, I had chosen a path that protected the company and my own interests without seeking disproportionate retribution. One year, after the launch party incident, I hosted a team celebration for the successful implementation of Fusion Core 2.0 at over 50 major clients worldwide. As I looked around at the faces of people who had stood by me or joined my vision, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for a long time. Dexter raised his glass in a toast to Jillian, who taught us all that the best revenge is massive success. I shook my head, smiling. Not revenge, resilience, and not my success alone, but what we have built together. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Rachel joined me by the windows overlooking the city lights. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked. "If you had not had that IP agreement, or if I had not given you that warning?" Sometimes I admitted, "But I prefer to focus on what we are building now, not what might have been." "You know," Rachel said thoughtfully, "when I first reviewed your employment agreement years ago, I thought it was unusual but probably insignificant. I never imagined it would become the linchpin of such a dramatic corporate showdown." I smiled. "The best safety nets are the ones you hope never to use." The lesson I carry forward is not about vindication or victory, though both were satisfying. It is about the importance of valuing your own contributions enough to protect them properly. About understanding that in both personal and professional relationships, respect must be the foundation, not an optional extra. For those who have experienced workplace betrayal or undervaluation, my story offers a template not for revenge but for preparedness and self-advocacy. Document your contributions. Understand your legal rights. Build alliances with people of integrity. And when the moment comes to stand your ground, do so with calm confidence rather than reactive emotion. The journey from public humiliation to professional triumph taught me that true power comes not from titles or authority, but from the combination of excellence and foresight. Leonard had the title, but lacked the substance to back it up. I had built the substance first, and when the moment came, the title followed naturally. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone tried to take credit for your work or undervalue your contributions? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story of corporate justice resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences and lessons learned. Share this video with anyone who might need a reminder that preparation and persistence can turn the tables on even the most challenging workplace situations. Thank you for listening, and remember, your work has value. Protect it accordingly.